Yeah, as a reminder, the show's been knocked down from 90 minutes to an hour. So
It has.
We're doing what we can to get as much in, which is why, when Martin's here, we don't bother with the topic. We just go straight to calls.
Well, I'm just lazy, though.
And the biggest problem is actually for me to figure out which camera to look at now, which I've messed up about 20 times in the past few minutes. But we've got Hunter in Williston.
Am I on?
You're on, Hunter.
Hey, guys. It's great to get through. First-time caller. Recently, big fan of your show.
Thanks.
Like what you guys do.
Thanks much.
I had a couple of quick questions maybe could resolve quickly, and then one kind of idea that me and my friend were tumbling around. The first question I have is about agnosticism. It seems to me when I hear agnosticism, it's more of a religious view as far as I can't prove God, therefore I don't believe he exists until he's proved. And my perception of it was before is more of a philosophical argument saying God, the idea of God can't be proven, and that's the only position. That's my take on agnosticism. God, because of his definition, he can't be proven, but you could still be Christian or atheist or theist and be agnostic at the same time.
Okay.
Am I correct?
There's theism and atheism tend to relate to what you believe or say you believe, and Gnosticism and agnosticism tend to relate to what you know. But knowledge is a subset of belief. It's a confusing mess. I find there's different categories of agnostics for different reasons. Some of these are, I've already talked. You'll find a clip where I've railed against a particular type of agnostic. My thing is, I don't hold to the idea that that some would say that God is that there's no way to prove this. Mm-hmm. Now, for many of the gods and many of the claims about gods, they are by their definition untestable or unfalsifiable, and therefore, you're never gonna get there. So it's not so much this issue of not being able to prove it that bothers me. It's the issue that a lot of agnostics present, where they claim that you could never know that this is something that is an assertion that I don't see the justification for. It's one thing to say we don't know. It's a whole different thing to say we could never know.
Yeah, because that's an unfounded claim itself.
Yeah, when they use that to say, well, I'm not an atheist because I'm an agnostic.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy because there's a great big error there.
And those people tend to use the word agnostic simply because they are afraid of the word atheist. There's something about that scares them.
Right.
And so they're one of my friends described to me as an agnostic is an atheist with a foot in the door. And that's the kind of agnostic that we tend to come down really hard on. The long and short of it is that, you don't have to claim knowledge of a thing to decide that you believe it may be true or believe it may not be true. You often make the analogy to legal cases where there is a possibility of a defendant being innocent or guilty, and until all the evidence is, you don't know which of those is actually the case. However, you may, based upon whatever a bias is or whatever you have seen so far in the way of evidence or just a gut feeling or this, that, or the other that you may have, you may believe that the defendant is guilty or not guilty.
Right.
But you don't know yet. And eventually you will know, depending on where the evidence goes.
You may never know. Yeah. Depending on how you're going to define knowledge as to how certain one has to be to claim knowledge. And so I find it largely irrelevant, which is why one of the things we end up doing is asking somebody, tell us what you believe and why. Because I care what you believe, your beliefs inform your actions, and I care why. Because you can believe things for good reasons or bad reasons.
Mm-hmm. And it's up to the believer to pretty much define what it is he believes in before we can say whether or not we believe in it too. Otherwise, we don't really know what it is that we're trying to refute or not.
Yeah, I had somebody send me a message the other day basically saying, can you tell me what about God you don't believe in? And I had to explain, it's kind of silly for me to list all of the things that I don't believe in. And it's also silly for me to define God, because the second I say, okay, here's a definition of God and I don't believe it, what's the response going to be? Every single time it's going to be, well, that's not the God I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So instead, just tell me the God you're talking about and why you believe it, and we can work from there, instead of wasting all that time doing circles about, forcing me to define something.
All right. And my point that was supposed to be a little longer than that one, I guess, was me and my friend were talking about sympathy, and it came to my mind that if you can rationalize why someone believes a certain thing, then you would have to accept that idea as a rational idea.
No, because rationalization and rationality are not exactly the same. Like, you can rationalize your choice to believe in a thing, but that doesn't mean that it is a rational belief, if you know what I mean.
Well, maybe I stated it wrong.
Semantic, hair splitting there, but
right.
I
mean, if it's rational, or it's not rational, but if you can,
someone may believe
something.
Someone may believe something that is patently false, but they believe it with complete conviction, either because they have there's some psychological and emotional need driving them. Right. Like, your spouse has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and they're going to die in 6 months. No, that can't happen, right? They'll be in denial, or this, or they may have some sort of ideological opposition to whatever it is. They can believe something and have a whole laundry list of reasons that they think are really good reasons why they don't or do believe in the particular claim, but that doesn't mean that any of that's valid.
Right. That's not what I was trying to get at. It was more it wasn't about fact and truth as far as reason. I'm just saying if you can look at someone's circumstance and say the decision that they chose is rational given
it's not
what you know about it.
Okay, I think you might be confusing rational with
understandable
or valuable.
I mean rational is in the chain of events. Like if they're born in the Deep South, then it's rational to say that
it's not.
Are Southern Christian.
No, it's not. It's understandable that somebody born into a family of Christians would adopt Christianity.
Right.
That doesn't make it rational. That's the difference.
No, I meant how you approach that is rational. The chain that you follow is a rational progression of what you are witnessing.
It may be be the logical end result of something, but again, those reasons may still not be rational reasons. I think that you're conflating definitions of things.
Yeah, this is why I went with understandable instead of rational. It is completely understandable that this might be that this would be the direction someone would go based on the influences, but it doesn't make their position rational.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I understand. And if I can get one more little quick question, and it's just because you guys know about logical fallacies. And I've seen this on your show a lot. Someone brings up an argument that, for example, well, you weren't there when Jesus was crucified, and a clear rebuttal is, well, neither were you.
Right.
Is there a label for that type of useless argument that they bring to the table? Is there a name?
I don't know. I don't know that it's in. I mean, in logical terms, basically, they're just making an assertion that would necessarily be a flawed premise. I don't know that you would need to label it beyond that. Vapid, useless.
Well, wouldn't it just be sort of like assuming the truth of your conclusion? It's begging the question is one where you.
It may not necessarily be circular at all.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't really care if there was a specific term. I mean, I'm fine with actually. And one of the things I'd like to change because I've been doing this for 5 years or so, is that, and somebody brought this up in an email, and thank you for doing that, is that occasionally somebody will call in and we'll just say, oh, well, that's, circular reasoning, or that's an argument from ignorance, and just identify the fallacy without actually explaining what we're talking about. So in the future, I may take another second or two to explain what we're talking about. And it's a good time to point out that when we talk about an argument from ignorance, we're not saying that somebody's stupid. The specifics of an argument from ignorance are such that because you cannot demonstrate that I'm wrong, therefore I'm justified in believing that I'm right. It's the you can't disprove God thing.
It's because we as the human race are ignorant of the facts about a particular thing. Therefore, I am justified in just making up my own solution to this thing. No,
but the you weren't there
could be a non sequitur.
It's yes.
Yeah, because it's got nothing to your presence at a thing. It has nothing to do with whether or not the thing actually happened or not.
It won't be a non sequitur because that would apply to the conclusion. But now I'm nitpicking.
All right. Well,
but it's it's a flawed premise to say you weren't there, therefore you can't say anything about it. It's just nonsense.
Right. Well, that's all. The only questions I have, because I generally agree with pretty much everything you guys say. So
then you're generally right.
We like you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, and I'll try to give you guys a call again if I get another topic to talk about.
All right, great.
Take care.
Thanks a lot, Hunter.
Thanks.
Okay.
We have full lines. We
do.
Almost full because
Oh,
Hunter
that
left the
went-
gap. Which
oh.
I want to. Is it going to be 1, 2, 3? Nope, not quite full yet. The number's up. As a reminder, after the show's over, we get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's, 301 West Riverside Drive. We're only on for like 35 more minutes. That's how fast this show goes. So we're just going to keep on trucking.
So we should keep on
calls.
keeping on. Do you wanna-
By the way, I do want to mention, even if we don't actually get around to talking to it in detail, the debate that I mentioned that I did on Tuesday at UMBC is available online, and Martin was kind enough to, at atheistexperience.blogspot.com, there's a thread about it, which is, I don't know, got like 200 comments on it now.
Yeah.
And then Catherine
But it's still
Blackwell,
going, yeah. Catherine, who's been great,
who's been a
giving us
workhorse.
the embed codes and everything, yeah.
It's so the entire playlist is now up there in all 9 parts, and you can see the good, the bad, and the ugly from both sides.
Yes, and boy, the ugly is pretty ugly.
Well, you know.
I mean, that guy was a piece of work.
So we got Lee in Richmond. How are you?
Hi guys. Longtime fan. I'm a former Southern Independent Baptist preacher turned atheist.
You got the accent for it.
Yeah. Now I'm a libertarian, and I do find myself to be kind of an outcast in my own community, especially in
And
the
deservedly so. No,
Well-
I'm teasing.
Yeah, believe me. There is a politically correct way that a lot of atheists are tiptoeing around Islam these days. Most of the
Are they?
broadcasters are really, they'll attack anyone who comments against like Ayan Hirsi Ali. She's one of the most bravest people in the world.
Hey,
in my
Lee?
opinion. Huh?
I'm wondering, you said there were atheists are tiptoeing around Islam?
Oh, definitely.
Like who?
Yeah, who's doing that?
Well, I mean, I heard the nonprofits recently, and they're talking about the Ground Zero Mosque issue, and
That would've been
anyone who
that would've been
criticized it, I mean, they were going right after. I mean, they were attacking pretty firmly.
And Sam
Calling
Harris.
ignorant Tea Partiers,
hang on a second.
they must be. That's what they must be. Because that's the only people in the world who could possibly oppose this mosque.
Hang on, Lee. Let me explain, because that was the show that I hosted with my friends Gia and Chris, and
Yes.
let me clarify what the position was on that, because I think we were extremely clear on the show. We're not fans of mosques or churches or any kinds of religious buildings, but there's a question here of one group's constitutional rights. First off, this is an organization of American Muslims, which you have a right to be in this country, and just like you have rights, your right to be Christian or Hindu or Baha'i or whatever. And if you want to build, if you own property and you want to build a place of worship on it or a community center or what have you, you get to do that. And what we were responding to is essentially this attempt by people who, again, are coming from the Tea Party side, are coming from the far right, who, for one thing, are painting with this very broad brush this whole sort of, Islam was responsible for 9/11, therefore, these are the same people, and they're not really. And that was the point that we were making. It's like when some Christian wacko decides to blow up an abortion clinic, every Christian in that community isn't responsible for that crime. Okay.
Yeah, well,
Just
I can make an analogy on this.
Yeah.
Now, if Fred Phelps wanted to build a chapel as close as possible to the spot where Matthew Shepard was killed, we'd see through it. We'd call him on it. Atheists, we'd call him the jerk that he is. But there is political.
Okay,
we can't say that about Islam.
Lee, your analogy is horribly flawed because in this case, Fred Phelps is an individual.
Well, let's say the Westboro
that
Baptist
you're
Church.
directly objecting to, whereas building an Islamic community center blocks from Ground Zero it's not the same thing as what you're talking about. And by the way, Fred Phelps may in fact have the right to do that as long as he buys the land.
Right.
But
you have the right to, but
hang on.
pretty good at seeing through deceptions.
Hang on.